You've done it again. Replayed the conversation on your drive home, editing your own lines, giving yourself better comebacks you never actually said. You lost. You know you lost, and you don't even know what the fight was about. That feeling isn't weakness, it's evidence. Evidence that you were never in a conversation. You were in a system, and the system was built to make sure you'd lose before you opened your mouth. Here's the belief you've been sold, that mental strength means standing your ground, speaking up, holding the line, calling it out, confronting. That's the whole industry's answer to everything. Assert yourself, set the record straight, don't let them get away with it. That belief is a trap. Not because confrontation is cowardly, because confrontation is a battlefield the manipulator built, and you keep showing up to fight on it like it's neutral ground. A manipulator doesn't need to win the argument, they need you in the argument. The second you open your mouth to correct, defend, or explain, you've already given them the one thing they came for, your attention wired directly into their narrative. From that point on, whatever you say gets used as more material. Your logic becomes their next move. Your anger becomes their proof that you're the unstable one. Your explanation becomes a confession, no matter what you actually said. Nobody hands you this. You were taught the opposite your whole life. Speak your truth. Stand up for yourself. Don't let people walk over you. Good advice against a fair opponent. Catastrophic advice against someone whose entire skill set is turning your fairness into a weapon against you. There's a mechanism running underneath every manipulative relationship, and almost nobody names it directly. It has a name. I'll give it to you later. Hold on to that, because once you have it, you'll see it everywhere, in your job, your family, your relationship, your own head. But first, you need the architecture underneath it, because the label without the architecture is useless. Manipulation isn't a personality quirk, it's a behavioral algorithm running on your nervous system, and it only has one input it's optimizing for: your reaction. Not your compliance, not even your love, your reaction. Because reaction is data, and data is control. Every time you flinch, defend, cry, raise your voice, go quiet in that specific wounded way, you're feeding the algorithm exactly what it needs to calibrate its next move. This is not metaphorical. This is operant conditioning, the same mechanism used to train animals, except you're the one pulling the lever over and over, convinced you're fighting back. Smart people stopped feeding it. Here's how. First, they stop treating clarity as the goal. Most people believe that if they can just explain themselves clearly enough, the manipulator will finally understand, finally see the truth, finally stop. This is the single most expensive misunderstanding in psychology. You are assuming a shared objective, that both of you want resolution. You don't share an objective. You want resolution. They want control. Clarity isn't the missing ingredient. Clarity was never the goal for the other person, so producing more of it changes nothing, except how exhausted you get producing it. Smart people notice within the first 2 or 3 exchanges whether the other person is actually listening to update their view or listening to find the next opening. Once they clock the second one, they stop supplying ammunition disguised as explanation.
Second, they separate the emotion from the event before responding, not after. Most people process backwards, react first, regulate later, apologize for the reaction after the damage is done. By the time you're regulating, the manipulator has already logged your reaction as usable. Smart people install a gap, not a dramatic pause, not a performance of calm, a real neurological delay between stimulus and response, long enough for the prefrontal cortex to come back online after the amygdala's initial hijack. That gap is usually 3 to 5 seconds. It feels like nothing. It is everything. In that gap, the question isn't, how do I respond? The question is, what does this person need me to feel right now, and am I going to hand it to them? Most manipulation collapses the instant you stop supplying the emotion it's engineered to extract. Third, they downgrade the relationship's emotional bandwidth without announcing it. This is the part nobody teaches because it feels almost too passive to be a strategy. You don't confront, you don't withdraw dramatically, you simply give less. Less detail, less reaction, less of the parts of you that used to be available. Manipulators are exquisitely sensitive to access. They can feel the exact moment a door that used to be wide open starts closing, even a few degrees. Smart people close it a few degrees at a time, quietly, consistently, without narrating the decision. No speech, no ultimatum, just less oxygen going into the exchange every single time. Most manipulators either escalate briefly, testing whether the old access will return, and when it doesn't, they redirect towards someone whose door is still open. Now, before I give you the rest of this, I want you to actually do something, not just consume this. If you've made it this far, you already recognize a specific person or a specific version of yourself in what I just described. Subscribe if you want the rest of this framework, because I'm going to build on it in every video from here. This isn't a one-off list, it's a system I'm teaching in pieces. Then, drop a comment naming the exact pattern you just recognized, not the person, the pattern, the freeze, the over-explaining, the apologizing for things you didn't do. Naming it in writing does something reading it silently doesn't. It forces the pattern out of the fog of just how I am and into the category of thing I can now watch myself do. That's the first act of exiting the loop. Fourth, they stop trying to be understood by someone who benefits from misunderstanding them. This is the one that will sting because it cuts against everything you've been told about vulnerability and connection. Being deeply known feels like intimacy. It is intimacy, with someone safe. With someone unsafe, being deeply known is a liability, because everything you reveal becomes a lever. Your insecurities become access points. Your soft spots become instructions. Smart people don't get colder as people in general. They get radically more selective about who earns the download of their inner world. Around a manipulator specifically, they let themselves be inaccurate. Let the misread stand. Let the wrong story about them circulate uncorrected. It feels unbearable the first few times, like abandoning your own reputation. It is, in fact, the fastest way to stop supplying raw material to someone who is never going to use it kindly.
Fifth, and this is the one that finally earns its name, they exit the reactive loop entirely by refusing to be recruited into proving anything. Manipulators don't just provoke reactions, they provoke a specific kind of reaction. The compulsion to prove you're not what they're implying you are. Not selfish, not crazy, not overreacting, not ungrateful. That compulsion is called the reactive abuse trap, and it is the single most reliable mechanism keeping intelligent, self-aware people stuck in dynamics that are obviously bad for them. The manipulator says or implies something false and provoking. You react. Appropriately, proportionally, understandably, but the reaction itself now becomes the new subject. Suddenly, you're not discussing what they did, you're discussing how you reacted to what they did. The original behavior disappears from the conversation entirely, replaced by your tone, your volume, your issues. Smart people learn to spot the exact moment the subject has been swapped, and the second they spot it, they stop participating in the new conversation. Not with a dramatic refusal, with something closer to silence with intention, acknowledging nothing, defending nothing, proving nothing. The loop requires your participation to run. Remove the participation, and the loop has nothing left to execute against. Here's what's actually happening underneath every one of these 5 moves, and this is the part that changes how you see your entire life, not just this one relationship. You were conditioned, long before any manipulator ever met you, to believe that being good meant being legible, explainable, understandable, provable, correctable on demand. That conditioning didn't come from the manipulator. It came from every environment that rewarded you for making yourself easy to read and punished you, subtly, for having a self that didn't need external confirmation. Home, school, whatever social hierarchy you grew up navigating. Manipulators don't install this vulnerability, they just find it already installed and they specialize in operating it. Which means the deprogramming isn't really about the manipulator in your life at all. It's about dismantling the belief that your worth is something you owe an explanation of to anyone on demand. The moment you stop treating your inner life as something that requires a defense, you become almost unusable to someone whose entire method depends on your defense being available. You didn't lose those arguments because you were weak or slow or bad with words. You lost them because you were playing a game with rules only one of you was told existed. Now you know the actual rules. You're not required to play by them anymore. You're not even required to tell anyone you've stopped. That's not coldness. That's not detachment from people who matter. That's the exact moment a person stops being operable and starts being, for the first time in a long time, entirely their own.